Hello, fifth graders. So, my fourth graders, we do a read aloud in class, so I thought we would do one. And since we've been talking about reading this book so much once we were done testing and getting everything together, I thought I'd go ahead and do a read aloud with you guys over the computer so you could just kind of relax during your day and listen, or if you need like something for a reading log, this would be a great option. So, we are going to start Number the Stars. Since you guys were so interested in the Holocaust when we worked on that in social studies, I thought we'd go ahead and dive into this book. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to read you the back cover so we can kind of get a synopsis or a summary of the book. And then we're going to read chapter 1. So just sit back, relax, grab a pillow, grab a blanket, get in your jammies, whatever you want to do so you're nice and comfortable. This is just going to be for fun. There's not going to be a test or anything like that. I just wanted to give you guys something enjoyable to do while you were home also. So it says, 10-year-old Anne-Marie Johansson and her best friend Ellen Rosen often think about life before the war. But it's now 1943 and their life in Copenhagen is filled with school, food shortages, and the Nazi soldiers marching in their town. The Nazis won't stop. The Jews of Denmark are being relocated, so Ellen moves in with the Johanssons and pretends to be part of the family. Then Anne-Marie is asked to go on a dangerous mission. Somehow she must find the strength and courage to save her best friend's life. There's no turning back now. Dun, dun, dun. So today we're going to read chapter 1, which is called Why Are You Running? And then tomorrow we'll read chapter 2. I hope that works for you guys. So sit back, relax. Here we go. I'll race you to the corner, Ellen. Anne-Marie adjusted the thick leather pack on her back so that her school books balanced evenly. Ready? She looked at her best friend. Ellen made a face. No, she said, laughing. You know I can't beat you. My legs aren't as long. Can't we just walk like civilized people? She was a stocky 10-year-old, unlike lanky Anne-Marie. We have to practice for the athletic meet on Friday. I know I'm going to win the girls' race this week. I was second last week, but I've been practicing every day. Come on, Ellen. Anne-Marie pleaded, eyeing the distance to the next corner in the Copenhagen street. Please. Ellen hesitated, then nodded and shifted her own rucksack of books against her shoulders. Oh, all right. Ready, she said. Go, shouted Anne-Marie, and the two girls were off, racing along the residential sidewalk. Anne-Marie's silvery blonde hair flew behind her, and Ellen's dark pigtails bounced against her shoulders. Wait for me, wailed little Christy, left behind, but the two older girls weren't listening. Anne-Marie outdistanced her friends quickly, even though one of her shoes came untied as she sped along the street called Osterbrogade, past the small shops and cafes of her neighborhood here in the northeast Copenhagen. Laughing, she skirted an elderly lady in black who carried a shopping bag made of string. A young woman pushing a baby in a carriage moved aside to make way. The corner was just ahead. Anne-Marie looked up, panting. Just as she reached the corner, her laugh stopped. Her heart seemed to skip a beat. Halt, the soldier ordered in a stern voice. The German word was as familiar as it was frightening. Anne-Marie had heard it often enough before, but it had never been directed at her until now. Behind her, Ellen also slowed and stopped. Far back, little Christy was plodding along, her face in a pout because the girls hadn't waited for her. Anne-Marie stared up. There were two of them. That meant 2 helmets, 2 sets of cold eyes glaring at her, and 4 tall, shiny boots planted firmly on the sidewalk, blocking her path to home. And it meant 2 rifles gripped in the hands of the soldiers. She stared at the rifles first. Then, finally, she looked into the face of the soldier who had ordered her to halt. Why are you running? The harsh voice asked. His Danish was very poor. 3 years, Anne-Marie thought with contempt. 3 years they've been in our country, and they still can't speak our language. I was racing my friends, she answered politely. We have races at school every Friday, and I want to do well, so Her voice trailed away, the sentence unfinished. Don't talk so much, she told herself. Just answer them, that's all. She glanced back. Ellen was motionless on the sidewalk a few yards behind her. Farther back, Christy was still sulking and walking slowly toward the corner. Nearby, a woman who had come to the doorway of a shop and was standing silently watching. One of the soldiers, the taller one, moved toward her. Anne-Marie recognized him as the one she and Ellen always called in whispers the giraffe, because of his height and the long neck that extended from his stiff collar. He and his partner were always on the corner. He prodded the corner of her backpack with the stock of his rifle Anne-Marie trembled. "What is in here?" he asked loudly. From the corner of her eye, she saw the shopkeeper move quietly back into the shadows of the doorway, out of sight. "School books," she answered truthfully. "Are you a good student?" the soldier asked. He seemed to be sneering. "Yes." "What's your name?" "Anne-Marie Johansson." "Your friend, is she a good student too?" He was looking beyond her, at Ellen, who hadn't moved. Anne-Marie looked back too and saw Ellen's face, unusually rosy-cheeked, was pale, and her dark eyes were wide. She nodded at the soldier. "Better than me," she said. "What's her name?" "Ellen." "And who is this?" he asked, looking to Anne-Marie's side. Christy had appeared there suddenly, scowling at everyone. "My little sister." She reached down for Christy's hand, but Christy, always stubborn, refused it and put her hands on her hips defiantly. The soldier reached down and stroked her little sister's short, tangled curls. "Stand still, Christy," Anne-Marie ordered silently, praying that somehow the obstinate 5-year-old would receive the message. But Christy reached up and pushed the soldier's hand away. "Don't," she said loudly. Both soldiers began to laugh. They spoke to each other in rapid German that Anne-Marie couldn't understand. "She is pretty, like my own little girl," the tall one said in a more pleasant voice. Anne-Marie tried to smile politely. "Go home, all of you. Go study your school books, and don't run. You look like hoodlums when you run." The two soldiers turned away. Quickly, Anne-Marie reached down again and grabbed her sister's hand before Christy could resist. Hurrying the little girl along, she rounded the corner. In a moment, Ellen was beside her. They walked quickly, not speaking, with Christy between them toward the large apartment building where both families lived. When they were almost home, Ellen whispered suddenly, "I was so scared." "Me too," Anne-Marie whispered back. As they turned to enter their building, both girls looked straight ahead toward the door. They did it purposely so that they would not catch the eyes or attention of 2 more soldiers who stood with their guns on the corner as well. Christy scurried ahead of them through the door, chattering about the picture she was bringing home from kindergarten to show Mama. For Christy, the soldiers were simply part of the landscape, something that had always been there, on every corner, as unimportant as lamppost, throughout her remembered life. "Are you going to tell your mother?" Ellen asked Anne-Marie as they trudged together up the stairs. "I'm not. My mother would be upset." "No, I won't either. Mama would probably scold me for running on the street." She said goodbye to Ellen on the 2nd floor where Ellen lived and continued on to the 3rd floor, practicing in her mind a cheerful greeting for her mother. A smile, a description of today's spelling test in which she had done well. She was too late. Chrissy had gotten there first. And he poked Anne-Marie's book bag with his gun, and then he grabbed my hair. Christy was chattering as she took off her sweater in the center of the apartment living room. But I wasn't scared. Anne-Marie was, and Ellen too, but not me. Mrs. Johansson rose quickly from the chair by the window where she'd been sitting. Mrs. Rosen, Ellen's mother, was there too, in the opposite chair. They'd been having coffee together as they did many afternoons. Of course, it wasn't really coffee, though the mother still called it that. Having coffee. There had been no real coffee in Copenhagen since the beginning of the Nazi occupation. Not even any real tea. The mother sipped at hot water flavored with herbs. "Anne-Marie, what happened? What is Christy talking about?" her mother asked anxiously. "Where's Ellen?" Mrs. Rosen had a frightened look. "Ellen's in your apartment. She didn't realize you were here," Anne-Marie explained. "Don't worry, it wasn't anything. It was the 2 soldiers who stand on the corner of Osterbroggen. You've seen them. You know, the tall one with the long neck, the one who looks like a silly giraffe." She told her mother and Mrs. Rosen of the incident, trying to make it sound humorous and unimportant. But their uneasy looks didn't change. "I slapped his hand and shouted at him," Christy announced importantly. "No, she didn't, Mama," Anne-Marie reassured her mother. "She's exaggerating, as she always does." Mrs. Johansson moved to the window and looked down to the street below. The Copenhagen neighborhood was quiet. It looked the same as always, people coming and going from the shops, children at play, the soldiers on the corner. She spoke in a low voice to Ellen's mother. "They must be edgy because of the latest resistance incidents. Did you read De Furidansky about the bombings in Hilderod and Nuremberg?" Although she pretended to be absorbed in unpacking her school books, Anne-Marie listened. She knew what her mother was referring to. De Frie Danske, the Free Danes, was an illegal newspaper. Peter Nielsen brought it to them occasionally, carefully folded and hid it among ordinary books and papers, and Mama always burned it after she and Papa read it. But Anne-Marie heard Mama and Papa talk, sometimes at night, about the news they received that way. News of sabotage against the Nazis, bombs hidden and exploded in the factories that produced war materials, and industrial railroad lines damaged so that the goods couldn't be transported. And she knew what resistance meant. Papa had explained when she overheard the word and asked. The resistance fighters were Danish people, no one knew who because they were very secret, who were determined to bring harm to the Nazis however they could. They damaged the German trucks and cars and bombed their factories. They were very brave. Sometimes they were caught and killed. I must go and speak to Ellen, Mrs. Rosin said, moving toward the door. You girls walk a different way to school tomorrow. Promise me, Anne-Marie, and Ellen will promise too. We will, Mrs. Rosin, but what does it matter? There are German soldiers on every corner. They will remember your faces, Mrs. Rosin said, turning in the doorway to the hall. It is important to be one of the crowd, always. Be one of many. Be sure that they never have a reason to remember your face. She disappeared into the hall and closed the door behind her. He'll remember my face, Mama, Christy announced happily, because he said I look like his little girl. He said I was pretty. If he has such a pretty little girl, why doesn't he go back to her like a good father, Mrs. Johansson murmured, stroking Christy's cheek. Why doesn't he go back to his own country? Mama, is there anything to eat? Anne-Marie asked, hoping to take her mother's mind away from the soldiers. Take some bread and give a piece to your sister. With butter? Christy asked hopefully. No butter, her mother replied. You know that. Christy sighed as Anne-Marie went to the bread box in the kitchen. I wish I could have a cupcake, she said. A big yellow cupcake with pink frosting. Her mother laughed. For a little girl, you have a long memory, she told Christy. There hasn't been any butter or sugar for cupcakes for a long time. A year, at least. When will there be cupcakes again? When the war ends, Mrs. Johansson said. She glanced through the window down to the street corner where the soldiers stood, their faces impassive beneath the metal helmets. When the soldiers leave. And we're going to stop there. If you enjoyed it, do me a favor, subscribe to my channel so we can all talk to each other all the time and leave me a comment so I know that you were here. I will pick this up tomorrow. We'll read chapter 2 and I will post it for you guys. I hope you enjoy it. I miss you, and I will also be posting some other videos tomorrow and Friday morning. So be ready for that. Have a good night.